How do I make Windows 7 less aggressive in caching memory? I've noted recently that Windows 7 on my machine has been complaining about running out of memory and that I should close some programs. It would then usually point out a program I have running that does have a memory leak and has grown quite large. However, usually these programs start at 20 MB of RAM usage, and only after running the program between 12 to 24 hours do they grow to, at most, 200 MB of RAM usage. I never have more than 3 of these programs running at the same time, so 600 MB of RAM usage max I have ever seen from my running programs. I'm running Windows 7 x64 on a machine with 4 GB of RAM. At first I actually forgot this and would just restart the programs when Windows complained, but now that I remembered, the fact that Windows is complaining about me using 600 MB of RAM, under 2 GB, even if you include memory used by the OS itself, seemed odd. So I pulled up the System Process window to look at my total memory usage from my processors and system processes that were listed. It added up to just over 700 MB, so I was still confused. Then I went to the Resource Monitor and opened the Memory tab. There I think I found my answer. It noted that I was actually only using 33% of my RAM. However, on the Physical Memory Resource Allocation bar, the modified section was up to 2.3 GB, the standby section was up to 540 MB, the free section was under 20 MB, cached memory was listed at 2.8 GB and available memory was listed at 550 MB. These values being slightly rounded, of course, as they are constantly changing as I write this. So apparently Windows 7 is using more memory than I am. I did, at some point in the past, make some modifications to the installed Windows Services menu, but that was only to disable certain hosting services, since I didn't want to do any media sharing, to enable the Telnet client, and remove Internet Explorer, but it could be my fault. Is there any way to make Windows not do this, or at least cache a lot less aggressively so I stop getting these low on memory notices?
The standby memory is not a problem. It is considered free and will be reallocated on request. It just contains memory recently used by programs, but is now freed. If another program requests more memory than is free, the system should allocate from the standby set seamlessly, since standby memory isn't really in use at the moment. Your excessive modified memory is your problem, because it cannot be reallocated easily. See here. It's likely to be caused by either a memory leak, which seems to correspond with your first paragraph, what programs are leaking, or a page file being too small, is your page file fixed size or deactivated.
The superfetch preemptive caching is not your problem. Windows 7 will use as much spare memory as it can to preemptively cache what it thinks you are going to need next. If it gets it right, it saves you a bit of time and your applications appear quicker and more responsive. If it guesses wrong, and you need some other data, superfetch will release some of the memory it has, to enable you to load the data you really need. See this URL. If you are getting low memory problems, it isn't going to be because of superfetch, as it will relinquish as much memory as necessary if applications demand it. Your available memory, 550 MB, is what is being used by superfetch, so clearly you haven't ran out of memory yet. Even when you do use up all your RAM, your machine will fall back onto virtual memory, though you will want to avoid this because of the performance hit. So it suggests your low memory problems are due to problems elsewhere, perhaps one of your leaking apps is consuming, and not relinquishing, other types of resources. Either way, the solution is more likely to be found by tackling your buggy applications, than by messing about with superfetch.
Since you don't think the issue is being caused by a program with a memory leak, the alternative would be to increase your page file size. While the page file is not your main memory, it will allow the operating system to swap more data to the hard drive, and hopefully, stop the out of memory message. The only other option would be to remove the program associated with the process that has the huge 13 GB footprint, though I have no idea what program would need to page that much memory, unless it was some high-end PC game or 3D rendering software.
From my experience, standby memory creep is a real problem. For example, if I run Snagit in rolling Windows mode for a lengthy article, there will be portions of the article that were not captured when running on only standby memory. In any case, I find that my computer runs sluggish on standby memory. To solve the problem, I use the memory optimizer out of the free Glare utilities. My computer has 6 GB of memory. When I first boot up, I have about 2 GB of in-use memory, 2 GB of standby, and 2 GB of what I call free memory according to Windows Resource Monitor. Within a half a day or so, all my free memory would turn into standby memory whether I was using the computer or not. Now I have Glare Utilities Memory Optimizer start up with Windows and can keep my computer running indefinitely, having the full 2 GB of free memory available. Every time I sit down for another session, I first double-click the Memory Optimizer tray icon and do an optimize, asking for my original 2 GB of free memory to be freed up. I can ask for more, but that's the maximum it will free up regardless. It takes about 30 seconds for the optimizer to complete, which is much less than that required for a reboot. It has an auto-optimization mode, but I haven't been able to figure out how to make it work.
If you want to support the channel, please consider liking and subscribing.